Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with yet another talk about Mahler boxes by popular demand. You asked me to do this, and heaven forfend that I should deny what anybody wants. But actually, this is going to be a fun one. I really looked forward to this. At first, I thought, what's the point? But then I really thought, it makes sense. We're doing partial Mahler cycles in boxes. And by that, I mean actual, conductors who did a bunch of symphonies that the label saw fit to stick in a box. Because there are some fabulous, truly fabulous partial Mahler cycles out there. So these are not performances that you can get singly or so much anymore. I mean, at one point you could, for most of them. Some of them only showed up in boxes. And I really think there may be some very pleasant surprises and some classics by conductors of yore who never completed full cycles. So it really makes sense to do this. And there are actually many more conductors than we're talking about here, but I'm doing seven partial Mahler cycles. And, you can tell me what you think. We're going to start with a box set that hasn't even been released yet. It's due out in a couple of weeks as of time of videographing here. But I figured I'd talk about it now because I would, sort of beat everybody to the punch. And in any case, by the time most people see this in the next 2 or 3 centuries, in the year 2762, it will have long been released and deleted and remastered and released and deleted and remastered and re-remastered and deleted. And by then, who knows? So, Barbirolli. Sir John Barbirolli, yes, Barbirolli, a wonderful, devoted Mahler conductor who was wildly variable. And particularly in Mahler, I often feel that he just wasn't up to the task, but he did some great Mahler. Now, what we get in this box are his symphonies numbers 1, he didn't do 2, didn't do 3, didn't do 4, 5, 6, and 9. You can get live recordings, for example, on Testament with the Berlin Philharmonic and other things, of many of the other symphonies. He did the second in Stuttgart and the third in Berlin. They're mostly just awful, just terrible. I mean, Barbaroli live was a hit or miss thing. He was one of those conductors who, frankly, was at his best under studio conditions, and he was very good in the studio. He really was. I mean, there was no inhibition or lack of excitement in studio performances. They just made sure he got it right. So, how are these performances? Well, one is an earlier performance with the Halle Orchestra, and it's really rough and ready. I mean, it's not a competitive first symphony. It's exciting. The shape of the performance is nice, but it's just, and Mahler, of course, can always take some coarseness to the tone, depending on what passage you're playing. And I kind of enjoy it, just for what it is, but is it a great Mahler one? Well, no. It is exciting. I'll give it that. It's an exciting performance, but to my taste, it's just a little bit, sounds more like a community orchestra is doing it, which is basically what the Halle was for much of Barbaroli's tenure there. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Next, we come to his number 5. And the Barbaroli Mahler Fifth is an iconic performance. It is one of the great Mahler Fives. It truly, truly is. It has some oddities of tempo. For example, the quite slow tempo for the finale. You kind of wish it could be a little bit more zippy, I think, in places. Also the second movement, but it is an intense, passionate, marvelous performance. There's a fabulous moment in the middle of the scherzo where the whole wind section comes in a bar early, just before, the big climax. Okay, that's Barbaroli. You have to be prepared for a couple of those things. But it's really, really a fabulous Mahler 5. And it was one of the performances that sort of put the piece on the map. Largely because, of course, the British press rallied behind it, to root for the hometown team. But it's a fine, fine effort. Number 6 is more controversial. 6 has, first of all, no repeat in the first movement, and it has the andante before the scherzo, which, of course, is what they're telling us we should be doing now. But that's wrong. It's so wrong. Oh, God, it's wrong. We don't have to go there because it never bothered me, actually. I just flip them around and play them in the other order. The tempos are really slow. I mean, really slow and really heavy. Some people think it's just too slow. Other people find that, especially in the finale, which runs to like 32, 33 minutes or something, it is absolutely the implacable march of doom. I think it's a very, very powerful performance. I really do. But it's one that I do not listen to all that frequently because it's highly personal and I think very, very much an acquired taste. But you can't question either the quality of the playing or the conviction or the splendid sonics. I hope on this new release that the sonics are still splendid. So that's okay. The ninth is with the Berlin Philharmonic. It sucks. It's awful. Some people swear by it. I don't understand it. The orchestra clearly doesn't know the music. Barbaroli is not on his best form. The playing is dismal. The sonics were shallow. I don't know why anybody would want that performance in the ninth. It's just dreadful. But you also get the famous disc of the three major song cycles, the Rückert-Lieder, the Kindertotenlieder, and the Songs of a Wayfarer with Janet Baker, which is one of the greatest Mahler recordings ever made, plain and simple. Now, of course, anyone who knows Mahler and who likes singing or who likes Janet Baker or has this record. It's a great record, but it really deserves to be in the box. So, what is this box good for? Well, you have 1 and 9, which are not special, and then you have really, really fine performances of the songs in the 5th, and a controversial 6th, but one which you can't question in terms of commitment and execution. It's a fully realized conception of the work by a major Mahler interpreter. So that's Barbirolli, and I think that's a good way to start. It's a good way to start. Next, another old hand at Mahler, Klemps, Otto Klemperer. Now, his Mahler, he knew Mahler. Mahler got his career started. There is an authenticity to Klemperer's Mahler that is absolutely undeniable while still being totally Klemperer-like. In this particular set, you get the Mahler 2, a very, very fine Mahler 2. Recordings are a little cloudy, but I love the way Klemperer paces this piece with a surprisingly fast first movement, and then some rather remarkable tempos later on. The scherzo, which is slow but very, very emotionally right, spooky, and with the woodwinds so forward, and it's just wonderful. And the finale, a very good finale. It's just fine, and with some extraordinarily slow tempos in places and quick tempos in others. Klemperer was Klemperer. I like this Mahler too. I like it very much. Then we have the 4th. Again, another very good performance with a quick adagio, surprisingly quick adagio, and whether you like it or not is going to depend on how you deal with Elisabeth Schwarzkopf, who sings the finale, and I think she's just awful. She's always so affected. And the whole point of that last movement, as Mahler says, is that it should be sung with openness, purity, innocence, with a childlike expression. Boy, was she the last person in the world to do that. But she was the wife of Walter Legg, the producer, and so there you have it. She doesn't wreck the performance, but it's really very much a matter of personal taste. Next, the Mahler 7. This was Klemperer at his latest and slowest. It's just, it's excruciating. It's just excruciating. Let's not kid ourselves. It's really, really slow. And you just wish he'd done it 10 years earlier. That's all I can say. It's with the Philharmonia. They're all with the Philharmonia. They play it, they get through it, and we may or may not. But you also get the 9th. And the 9th is I think, in terms of expressionistic angst, one of the great 9ths. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance of the 9th. Very, very stark and somber and gritty, with a rondo burlesque that has a slow tempo, but that really shows you what the character of the music is supposed to be. Again, because of Klemperer's typically forward woodwind balance, and a rather swift concluding adagio, which again is typical of Klemperer. He played fast music slow and slow music fast. That was his thing, because it was his total lack of sentimentality in his performances. It sounds like he looks gaunt, grim, stoic, wonderful. And so you also get a bunch of songs with Crystal Ludwig. You get some of the, you get a few of the Wunderhorn songs
and some of the Rückert Lieder, as I recall. And let's see, because she did, yes. Wait a minute. Let me just see which ones are on here. I get to look at the booklet with its absolutely teensy print. Yes, that's what you get. You know, ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen Mitternacht, das irdische Leben, ich atme einen Lindenduft, and wo die schönen Trompeten blasen. Yes, those are all with Christa Ludwig. And then, last but not least, there is the iconic Das Lied von der Erde with Christa Ludwig and Fritz Wunderlich, which is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. So this is a Mahler box that everybody should have. I mean, it's that simple. Even with the Kooky Seventh, everybody should have this just to hear Klemperer's combination of idiomatic Mahlerianisms with also purely personal Klemperishness. It's phenomenal. So that's a good one. And it sits right here on my shelf, so I can put it away after I talk about it. Next, another classic Mahler guy, Bruno Walter. You gotta have Bruno Walter. Now, Bruno Walter did, and they're both in this cheapy budget box. Yay, both of them are. Mahler Symphony No. 1 twice. There's a mono one and a stereo one. And the mono one is a little quicker and more exciting, and it's with the New York Phil. And the stereo one is with, I believe, Columbia, the Columbia Symphony. Yes, exactly. And it's better to have the New York Phil, trust me. But still, it's wonderful. And, you know, either way, they're fresh, lively performances. No exposition repeats from Walter either. And then he did Mahler, too. He did The Resurrection. I love this Resurrection. This is a quick and not, you know, heavy and pompous resurrection. Not at all. I mean, Walter wasn't that kind of guy, but he knows the idiom. You hear what you're supposed to hear. You hear the tam-tams. You hear the struck with the bow strings. You hear all of the little touches and details that give Mahler's marvelous sound world that sort of color. And it has one of the best sounding organs I've ever heard at the end. It's one of the most glorious conclusions you've ever heard of the work. So Mahler 2 is great. Mahler 4. So the fourth here is mono, and it's sort of old, and it has some imperfections in the playing, but it's a completely unaffected, wonderfully fresh and lively interpretation. Really, I think what Mahler had in mind. And then you have the fifth, again with the New York Philharmonic. That's another mono one, and that's it strikes me always as a bit shallow and not intense enough. And the playing is somewhat scruffy, but again, it's useful for example, the quick tempo and the adagietto, which had not yet become the distended thing that it later became. And so it's Walter, it's Mahler. You want to hear it, right? It's historically interesting. Then another fantastic Das Lied von der Erde. This one's with Ernst Häfliger and Mildred Miller, who is horribly underrated. You know, everyone talks about how fabulous Kathleen Ferrier is with Walter and Das Lied von der Erde. She's terrible. She sounds terrible. Part of the afflatus concerning that recording is that Mahler just loved Kathleen Ferrier. He was just in love with her. He thought she was so radiant and wonderful and spiritual. And they have all this. He was in love with her, possibly. Who knows? Well, he felt the same way about Mildred Miller. I mean, you know, conductors do that. They fall in love with their sopranos, or in this case, their contraltos. And then we have Walter with Mildred Miller doing some of the early Mahler Lieder, which is really a very interesting bonus, with, I think, Walter at the piano. Let me see. Let me make sure that's what this one is. Here we are. Yes, here they are. No, it's with Desi Halban. I'm sorry. Desi Halban with Bruno Walter. And let's see. What else have we got here? Okay, there's a couple other things here. There's a Songs of a Wayfarer. That's, I think, with Mildred Miller. But let me check up. There it is. Songs of a Wayfarer with Mildred Miller. I got it. So that's Bruno Walter's Mahler, and that is also essential. You really have to hear these if you care about Mahler, and if you like Mahler like I do. It's absolutely essential. Finally, we're only in the middle. Another historical special disc, Hans Rosbaud's Mahler. Now, I already did a video about these.
So you can go look up that video. I'm only mentioning it here for the purpose of saying that Rosbaud was a fabulous Mahler conductor. He was a fabulous conductor of everything. He was one of those conductors whose musicality was so intense that everything that he did just came to life. It all made sense. It all just sounded just great. Even when he had a crappy orchestra, which, the SWR Symphony Orchestra or Baden-Baden or whatever the heck it was back then, it was, yes, I think so, Südwestfunk Orchestra Baden-Baden, and sometimes the Cologne Radio Symphony Orchestra as well. But you get Symphonies 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and Das Lied von der Erde. And this is essential Mahler listening as well, especially since it came from Germany in the immediate post-war period. The 50s and early in the 60s. Rosbaud was just great. He was one of those special guys. You just wish he'd had a great orchestra, and they just turned him loose on whatever he wanted to do. But this is an important set in the history of Mahler performance as well. So it's fun. We've sort of gotten a bunch of historical things, and then after that, we're doing not historical things. Well, this is kind of historical, actually. This is rather fascinating. This is Kondrashin. Kirill Kondrashin. These are the Melodia performances. There are bunches of other Mahler performances by Kondrashin floating around. There's a very good number 1. There's a very good 7 with the Concertgebouw. Some really, really fine stuff. He was a wonderful Mahler conductor. Also, he was noted for his quick tempos. He's totally personal in the way that he plays the music, which is very swift, like Shostakovich. Very quick and very exciting, and not, there's none of the heavy Germanness to the music that it sometimes has with Kondrashin. It sounds Russian, believe it or not, just pedal to the metal and full speed ahead. And in this particular box, you get numbers 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. He couldn't do 2 and 8 because of their religious, the religious angle, which was not exactly welcome in communist Russia at the time. But the interesting thing about this is that you get the words, the choral movements, and the finale of the 4th, and the choral movements of the 3rd twice, in Russian and in German. So you can hear them in their original language, sort of, kind of, however they pronounce it, or you can hear them in Russian, which I think is awfully interesting. I like listening to them in Russian, but these are really fun performances. I don't know if you can find them easily. A couple of them, 3 of them, were taken and put on a coupling with, what's the guy who did the Tardistan Orchestra? I forget what his name is. It doesn't matter. You'll tell me, I'm sure. But they put his Mahler with the Kondrashin Mahler to compare them. It's like numbers 1, 5, and 9 or something. I don't know. It's a very strange concept. It's on Melodia, and it costs a lot of money. Melodia discs tend to be rather expensive now. But you may be able to find this. It may be available. This was actually a Japanese Melodia BMG when they were still doing it. So you get to see it in Cyrillic and you get to see it in Japanese, and then you know your Mahler so you can figure out what you're hearing at any given time. So Kondrashin is definitely somebody worth considering. In fact, as you can tell, there are no bad boxes. All these partial cycles are very, very interesting because they were done by people who were really dedicated to Mahler, but who, for whatever reason, never were able to complete a cycle in the studio. But some of them came awfully close, including, this is an interesting one. This one sort of is also kind of legendary. All right, let me stop qualifying it. It's legendary. This is Haitink's Kerst Matinee box. That means, Kerst Matinee means the Christmas Day concerts, which are a tradition in Amsterdam, evidently. And in this particular set, you get symphonies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9, plus the Songs of a Wayfarer and some songs, a bunch of songs from Des Knaben Wunderhorn. Now, these performances were famous for being more exciting and better, and certainly more dynamic than the studio recordings that Haitink was making at about the same time. If you can still find them, and I've seen them around, they are absolutely splendid. If you like the Concertgebouw and really want to know what it sounded like live in this period, because this is like the late 60s and early 70s, I believe. Yeah, seems somewhere around there. This is a wonderful, wonderful set to have. I will say they couldn't do the eighth, probably because they couldn't get all the choruses together on Christmas morning. I mean, could you imagine, say, well, getting a couple of hundred people say, come on in on Christmas morning? They're like, no, we're with our families. They're choristers. They're not professionally paid musicians in the same way that the orchestra is. So they never did the eighth. But you would think they would do on Christmas. I mean, 8 soloists on Christmas Day, must be a little difficult. And obviously they never did the sixth, because who is going to get up Christmas morning and go hear the 3 hammer blows or 2 hammer blows of fate, foretelling doom on all those present on joyous Christmas Day. So it's a wonderful thought, though. I mean, saying, oh boy, they're doing Mahler 6. Have Merry Christmas. Let's go listen to Mahler 6. So they never did Mahler 6. All of the other ones, of course, the other Mahler symphonies have happy endings, or in the case of the ninth, at least it's in a major key. I mean, the ninth is also, I think, questionable for Christmas Day, but they did it. So this box is a wonderful, wonderful souvenir of some tremendous musical occasions, and it's worth hunting down if you can find it. However, we have to wrap this talk up. And you knew what's coming. You all know what's coming because you've all mentioned it over and over when I was doing the complete cycles. And that was Levine. Jimmy Levine. This is controversial in many ways. He never did 2 and 8, although there are versions of, there's one movement of 8 and there's a 2 out there, which is pretty good. But these are his RCA studio recordings, and you get all of the symphonies except for numbers 2 and 8. You also get the 10th in the Derek Cook performing version with Philadelphia, which was recorded analog for the Adagio because it was a coupling with the 9th, and then digitally for the rest of the symphony when he finished it. I don't think that's very good. I think it's one of the weaker performances in here. First of all, because the early digital recording is quite shallow, and second of all, because the performance itself is just slow. It's slow and rather uneventful. Which I find somewhat difficult to take. However, most of the other stuff in here is really fantastic. It's first rate. Number 1 is with the London Symphony. It's marvelous. Number 4, I have 3 here too, I'm sorry. Number 3 is with Chicago, with Marilyn Horne, the soloist. I mean, it's really, really good. Also slow in the finale. It has its, and the scherzo too. It's a leisurely stroll through the Third Symphony, but it's amazingly well conducted and fabulously played. 4th is with Chicago too, with Judith Blagan, the soloist. It's a great 4th. 5 is with Philadelphia. It's one of the great 5ths. It's my reference 5th. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It was wonderful to hear Philadelphia play with this kind of guts and sharpness and authentic Mahlerian tang. So that was really great. 6 is with the LSO. It's a very impactful performance of the 6th. One odd thing about Levine, he hated cowbells. I've seen him do these pieces that required them live, and he just usually has them go dink, and then a little plink, dink, instead of that lovely random strolling cow sound that you're supposed to have with Mahler's cowbells. But you're not going to hear a lot of cowbells. But the 6th is just really, really exciting. Balances favor the timpani and percussion, which I don't object to because the performance is so tight and punchy. It's wonderful. 7 is with Chicago again. This is another one of those early digital recordings. It's come up rather better in the remastering, thank God. And it's also a very exciting performance. So it's okay, but I always found the sonics a little bit objectionable. 9 is again with Philly, and it's one of the great 9ths too. It's wonderfully intense, gorgeously played with knock'em sock'em climaxes and just all the sharpness and edge and bite the music needs. These are wonderful, wonderful performances. It is a shame that Levine didn't finish the entire cycle. And that's just the way it went. This is what we have, and it's also worth having. So, where does that leave us? 7 boxes, all of them in their way. Some of them are, they're all worth having, and some are just extraordinary. In fact, it may be that some of the best, Mahler quasi-cycle box things are not in the complete symphony cycles, because when you get right down to it, when you look at the complete symphony cycles, there are always going to be a couple performances that are less good than the other ones. Whereas Here, well, there are also maybe a couple that are less good than the other ones. So you're not really losing anything getting a partial cycle if these are the conductors who appeal to you and if these descriptions of what they're doing sound at all intriguing. So there you go. I think I only have one more Mahler box set talk in me. That'll be a talk about the complete Mahler quasi-complete editions, and there's only two, the one on EMI and the one on DG. So we'll see where we go with that. But in the meantime, enjoy these partial Mahler cycles. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.